It is to get out of one situation, the global leaders normally create another situation. And sometimes it is not the ones who are in trouble, but the ones who create the trouble are not even seen. A lot of proxy players are there in today's warfare. Sometimes it is their own personal ambition, and sometimes it is the business of war which dictates how you're going to fight a war. The military-industrial complex also shapes the war. After all, when you keep producing military hardware and you don't have a place to test it, how would you know what sells and what doesn't sell? So I think a lot of battlegrounds are created by the business of warfare, and they have to make profits, and America is one which is into business of warfare as well. So it is complex if you have to profit out of warfare and make sure that globe remains disturbed and nobody can mount a challenge. It is not comfortable sometimes to have too much of stability around, because any place which is stable might also become more powerful. Earlier it used to be boots on ground. Slowly it is turning out to be bots on ground. It means you're becoming autonomous. And if you're becoming autonomous, obviously the autonomous systems will be fielded through communication networks. The ranges and accuracy of your systems has to increase, and therefore your intelligence on the real-time threats also got to be looked at. If a missile is being fired at you, you should be able to catch it in the air and destroy it. Two-front theatre is not imaginary, it is for the real. And the way Pakistan and China work together, from conceptual to technological integration, which we saw somewhere unfolding during Ops Sindoor, I think we have to be very careful. If space and cyber are concerned, you can join them because none of them is visible to anyone. Pakistan can use all the space assets of China anytime.
Welcome back to the Line of Defense podcast on the Times of India. We are today joined by Lieutenant General PJS Pannu, who has seen warfare evolve from boots on ice to battles in orbit. He's commanded the Fire and Fury Corps in Ladakh and also shaped India's space, cyber, and special forces architecture. General, thank you for joining us. Let me start with what the world is talking about today, which is the West Asia war. We're sitting in India, we're sitting in New Delhi, the war is happening hundreds of miles away. But what are the potential spillover effects that you see from a defense preparedness point of view on India?
Aditi, go back to a couple of years when in 2020 and 2021, we saw a very rapid build-up on our own borders in Ladakh. Yeah. At that time, there was no warning. Nobody really knew how and when we will have to face a military confrontation, for the simple reason that the whole world was suffering from COVID as an epidemic. The surprises are always there. After that, at least our borders settled down and we know how, but gradually they have come to some understanding and normalcy. But then the Ukraine started, and people thought it will be a short and swift operation. Initially, they were also talking about the false flag operations. Russians started calling it a special operation, not a full-fledged military war. And then it remained an ongoing, protracted, unending operation which still continue. The world also saw improvement of ties within the West Asian region, where IMEC corridor was to be built based on Abraham Accords. And people thought that this time we are going to settle the problem between Israel and the Arab world once for all, and peace would prevail. But then again, there was a surprise that even Israelis, who are supposed to have a very good intelligence network, had no idea what was coming for them, and they were surprised all of a sudden. It was again felt that Israelis, with the capability that they have and the size of area that they had as the target was very small, as Gaza. But the war hasn't stopped there either. Slowly, the arc of violence has only extended and moved towards India. And then, while it did not come this way, we also got into a conflict with Pakistan. That was also a surprise. And you see, I have spoken about three surprises. So, therefore, when you ask how is it for India, well, the surprises can be there because it is to get out of one situation, the global leaders normally create another situation. And sometimes it is not the ones who are in trouble, but the ones who create the trouble are not even seen. A lot of proxy players are there in today's warfare. So, really speaking, we have to be always prepared. We can have an assessment of what is happening, but I think a lot of narratives get written to which the nations get drawn into. So, therefore, narrative reading and correct response to surprise is extremely important.
In this war, the US and the latest one, of course, the US Israel Iran war. US and Israel systematically tried to target Iran's defense infrastructure. Trump on day one said, "Unki missiles khatam ho gayi." But Iran has just not stopped.
Aditi, it is very clear that Iran has been preparing for this kind of a war for very, very long. I will take your mind back to 2005, 2006, when it was expected that Iran would produce a nuclear bomb by 2009. Since then, it was known that Iran is going to militarily challenge the Western world. What happened after that was, while the kinetic attack on the nuclear facility could have manifested as early as 2008-9, but I think Obama's intervention to have a nuclear deal for peaceful purposes came in. And second thing is, Israel attacked it. But that was not an attack which was kinetic. It was a non-kinetic attack, which was a cyber attack called Stuxnet. The nuclear program of Iran was destroyed. Then a couple of scientists and generals who were working towards making a nuclear bomb were also assassinated and eliminated from the program, which retarded the program of Iranians. So about now, say, about 2 decades they have been at it, and they knew that the war is going to come. They knew threats are not hollow. And a couple of months back, they've already had a preliminary operation where Iran was pounded by the American and Israeli aircrafts and missiles. They knew exactly what is going to come. And this time, when they were having a challenge where America wanted them to give up making a nuclear bomb, there have been a lot of back channels where they were having some kind of agreements. How much they actually agreed or not agreed is not on record. But the fact of the matter was that Americans decided that they would now take Iran to war through a direct attack of missiles and aircrafts. And that is exactly what happened. Now imagine a country which has been preparing for about 2 decades. What do you think they would be preparing for? They would be preparing for this kind of arsenal which they have. Their drone making capability has been known world over. In fact, they have been not only improved the technology over time, but I think a lot of lessons they have learned. And on the go, they have changed the technology and improved the technology while Russia and Ukraine have been fighting a war. So Iranian drones really have, over a period of time, come of age in technology. So it is a combination of missiles of different variety, including the hypersonics, which have been fielded, and the drones, which are much cheaper, but very accurate. All of them put on autonomous system is what Iran has been practicing over a period of time. Also, they knew that assassination of leadership, assassination of generals does happen because this has happened in the past. And I think they prepared a hierarchy where the command and control would still remain intact while the total leadership could could have seemed to be collapsing.
Seem to be collapsing. I was reading an article penned by you on something called Mosaic warfare. Uh, is this what were you referencing? Because this article was written 2 years ago, but it seems to be what Iran is practicing today. So, for our viewers, could you explain to them what Mosaic warfare is?
See, I wrote this article on Mosaic warfare about 2.5 years back. Actually, it was a concept of DARPA which came up in 2021, which talks about if you have to fight an autonomous battle, make sure that all your networks do not collapse together. So, therefore, build your networks which are independent yet interlinked. So, therefore, the concept of distributed command and control was a concept in which a subordinative formation is completely cohesive in nature, internally networked, programmed according to the lessons that they have mastered over a period of time through war games. And every day you can keep changing the programs where the autonomous systems using artificial intelligence, where reinforced learning works. It means every time you do a thing and it doesn't work or works, the reinforced learning would teach how to do it better or how to be more accurate, how to be more decisive. So both the intelligence grid and the operational grid are meshed together. So calling it the meshed intelligence and meshed operations, which are put on autonomous systems in auto decision making, where the command and control is distributed, irrespective of where the commander is or what the commander is saying. I think it is the pre-fed programs which start working. So, see the size of the country, that Iran is almost half the size of India or 4 times the size of Iraq. And you see in Gulf War, size of the country such as Iraq, it took not one but 2 Gulf wars to reach the command and control capturing Saddam Hussein. Here, this is 4 times more. The technology and the industry put together have brought to bear a huge amount of transformation in the military affairs. Globally, I think industry is now a large contributor by use of technology into modernizing the battlefields. And I think this is what you see, that distributed command and control in action. How I perceive it, it is quite close to the Mosaic that you're talking about.
So, interesting concept, Mosaic, but I'm wondering what happened with, let's say, the greatest intelligence agency on earth, which is Mossad and CIA. There seemed to have been no foresight that Iran can do this or Iran will do this.
Any intelligence agency is as good as that morning. What is going to be next morning really can be very different. How the opponent is planning and how the opponent would react also largely depends on the will of the nation and the wherewithal the nation has. So, really speaking, the capacity of a nation is based on will and wherewithal. And if you mistake will and wherewithal put together, then your intelligence can make you take terribly wrong decision. You can be wrong-footed.
So you're saying that, as you said, that they had 2 decades, Iran had 2 decades to plan for this war. And if they had this sort of a mosaic system in place, this was something that could have gone completely undetected by intelligence agencies like Mossad and CIA.
Yes, I'm not saying that Iran would have prepared Mosaic design about 2 decades back, but I think every day there is a new technology which comes in, and it all depends on the challenges that the adversaries can pose against you, and you prepare accordingly. But this is how it is showing up.
Do you believe that Trump knew what he was getting into? Did he anticipate it lasting this long, or did he think it could be a shock and awe operation like in Venezuela?
I sometimes feel that some people who are too much into Chanakya, they sometimes land up doing self-Chanakya, over-believing in what they think is right. I think it is also important to understand from the adversary's behavior and what your friends are talking about, completely disregarding NATO feeds into the system, completely disregarding anybody else within or without, and you take your gut as the main decision making, you can really, sometimes take a decision which you think is right, but it may turn out, turn around to be wrong. But I'm not saying at the moment he was right or wrong. I think time will tell that he's taken a pause. I think it is like in a match, you take a timeout because you want to reconsider what you have done. I think he might have taken this pause to reconsider his own way of thinking. Maybe he will have to make the correct foot forward, because I think it may have made him take the wrong foot forward.
Okay. Since we started with talks of those three wars, I want you to unpack for us and for our viewers India's learnings. What should India have learned from these three wars that have, rocked the whole world in quick succession?
I think when you are looking at how the world is changing, you find that the leaders are becoming very intolerant of each other. I think leaders are very ambitious, and the whole nation then supports the design of the leader. Sometimes, like, near the election, you find, Trump behaving differently, or, Xi Jinping behaving differently. So sometimes it is their own personal ambition, and sometimes it is the business of war which dictates how you're going to fight a war. The military industrial complex also shapes the war. After all, when you keep producing military hardware and you don't have a place to test it, how would you know what sells and what doesn't sell? So I think a lot of battlegrounds are created by the business of warfare, and they have to make profits, and America is one which is into business of warfare as well. So it is complex. If you have to profit out of warfare and make sure that globe remains disturbed and nobody can mount a challenge, it is not comfortable sometimes to have too much of stability around, because any place which is stable might also become more powerful. So I think keeping everybody running around and guessing around is also one of the strategies for some powerful countries to make money off war and to remain in power, which is extremely important. Also preserve their currency and preserve their relevance. I think sometimes when a nation is also losing relevance, they have to create some activity where they're looked at with more respect. Otherwise, they would lose it completely.
What are the lessons that India needs to be drawing as far as wars are concerned? Because we have two very hostile neighbors, one on the northern front, one on the western front. How does India manage these two hostile neighbors in the current war realities that the world is seeing? The use of cheap drones, the use of air defense systems, air shields, and satellites, communication hacks.
Earlier, it used to be boots on ground. Slowly, it is turning out to be bots on ground. It means you're becoming autonomous. And if you're becoming autonomous, obviously, the autonomous systems will be fielded through communication networks. The ranges and accuracy of your systems has to increase. And therefore, your intelligence on the real-time threats also got to be looked at. If a missile is being fired at you, you should be able to catch it in the air and destroy it. So therefore, you need to create a shield, which means that you have to make sure that the Iron Dome or the Golden Dome concept, which gives you complete defense from the ballistic missiles, is put into practice autonomously, because you don't have to have a human in loop, because it's very difficult for a human to decide the threat and react to it. It has to be done autonomously. Second thing is that the cost of warfare by itself is undergoing a change. You have to field cheaper, efficient systems to prevent casualties on ground. So therefore, from the Army, Navy, Air Force, where India, having disputed borders with both Pakistan and China, The boots on ground will still remain relevant to guard those disputed areas. But largely, the shape of the battlefield would depend on how, other than boots of ground, the non-kinetic, non-contact, and non-contact and kinetic, that kind of a warfare is something which would shape the battle. And sometimes they can even end the battle because they can start hitting out at your critical infrastructure. The economy can have a huge amount of damage that you may have to resort to making peace before you run your entire country down, where your infrastructure is, which you built with a lot of money and a lot of hard work, starts going down. It will take the country, I don't know how many years back. So I think war prevention is extremely important, and war can only be prevented if you're preparing for a future battle, which is based on high technology, high response mechanism.
One of the things that comes to mind is what the Pakistani General Asim Munir said he actually made a reference to a Reliance refinery in Jamnagar, Gujarat, and saying that we will hit it in case, of a future warfare. And that's exactly what Trump and Netanyahu have done with Iran. They've hit out at critical infrastructure. Do you think, as I'm saying, because I'm talking in terms of India and what are the lessons we need to draw from these wars that are raging? Uh, because we also have defense corridors. Do they have the potential to become sitting ducks, perhaps?
Actually, today, satellite imagery very clearly shows what you have where, and any of that can be destroyed and targeted. Unless, of course, you have made sure that you have protection from observation and protection from a direct hit. So it means that you have to increasingly go subterranean. A lot of systems, which I can't really talk about here, have already gone subterranean. However, a lot of technology is dual use. Your communications, your radars, which are working even for your aviation sector, your airfields, the aircrafts have to be out, on the aprons. All that infrastructure, of course, is usually very vulnerable. So one has to take both active and passive measures for defense. I think that is what the militaries keep practicing all the time. All the critical infrastructure, vulnerable areas, vulnerable points are all protected, whether they are to be targeted through missiles or otherwise through air. So it is not that they are sitting ducks. There are defenses planned
There are
around it.
defenses in place.
Yeah. Defenses are absolutely in place. That any projectile moving in the direction from whichever way, yeah. So that is the ballistic missile defense. And Sudarshan Chakra is really speaking, making sure that all the aerial attacks, whether they are space-based or air-based, are all catered for as far as surveillance is concerned, tracking is concerned, and the counter to it is concerned. Whether it is drones also, a lot of counter-drone systems are also
For the
in
benefit
place,
of our viewers, will you explain the concept of Sudarshan Chakra also, and where we are at, and how it is, in a manner of speaking, will protect India's vulnerable points in its entirety?
Yeah, Sudarshan Chakra basically means all around protection. It is 360 degree. So it means that anything which is from your space to skies and from ground are all given a protective shield. It also means how you will counter the drone attacks or missile attacks. It also talks about subterranean and underwater domain. So otherwise, it can't be 360 degrees. It can only be 180 degrees. So when you start looking at underwater domain and subterranean, so loosely, one can say that Sudarshan Chakra is all around and 360 degrees dome architecture. It can never be complete. There will always be work in progress. And more you see unfolding outside in the other countries, more you will find India would get more prepared for it.
Right. So what Iron Dome was for Israel, is that and more? Is that the Sudarshan Chakra
Yeah, Iron Dome.
analogy
Yeah,
that we come from?
Iron Dome is a set of counter missile systems. But I think Sudarshan Chakra is a little more than that, because it will not only be a system of missiles, but it will also involve other autonomous systems, including missiles.
When we're talking India's defense, we have to look at military modernization in a big way. So, coming to that, one part of it, after Operation Sindoor, we heard that the Indian Army was modernizing. We've established 5 Bhairav battalions, 2 Rudra brigades, and the raising of the Ashni drone platoon. Now, these all are newly established units. They are deployed along the western and the northern borders. Explain this move, sir. How does this help? Because you said that while all the other, land, sea, air will, but on space, satellite, all those warfares will be there. But on the ground, boots on the ground will always be your first line of defense, or maybe the second line of defense.
See, Bhairav battalions and Rudra brigades put together, it is a concept where you can't be surprised because there is a maneuver element attached to it. As soon as you come to know that there's a certain situation developing, so it is like, having a special forces battalion, which is deployed on ground. Otherwise, the special forces battalions are meant for strategic use. So Bhairav battalions are, really speaking, special forces units which are for tactical and operational use. Then we have Rudra brigades, which is an all arms concept, which is very close to what we have discussed as the Mosaic concept, where all the elements that you require for war fighting in a particular tactical battle area are networked autonomously, and they will be self-contained. So it means you don't have to really move things from outside. Internally, they would be self-contained to take any counter or proactive action. As far as the drones are concerned, you see, drones are always evolving. Drones and counter drones, it's a very different concept altogether. So the nationwide requirement of having a drone architecture is very important, but military has gone on to creating their own formations which would undertake drone operations for tactical, for logistic, and even for strategic reasons. So drones will also have some amount of connectivity with the terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks. So it means if you're going to have space as an element of warfare, the drones will get connected with the space, or if there is a terrestrial that is not space but on ground, the networks are working. So the drones will have the ability to switch over and get into the grid of drone defense and drone offensive systems. So I think it's a very composite way of looking at it, is to have drone formations who would completely handle the autonomous warfighting.
And this was done after Operation Sindoor. So we didn't have it at that time. And then the Op Sindoor happened. And then we realized that now with these twin threats on our borders, and as you said, they were surprises. So, which means that we are better prepared. How does this make us more effective in dealing with another Pakistani or Chinese misadventure?
See, not that we were not prepared earlier. I think we had formed battalions earlier. But I think a lot of ad hoc units used to be created for doing this kind of a job. So from ad hoc, it has become a little more formalized. And then you have troops already earmarked. They will remain an entity. They will continue to train. They will continue to build the systems and arm them according to the evolving situations. For example, what happens in special forces, or say equivalent to Bhairav battalions, is that your scaling is very different of the weapons that you hold. There's something called a golf bag concept, that if you want to pick up an assault rifle, or you want to pick up a sniper rifle, or you want to make sure that your teams are equipped differently for a different mission, well, there is a flexibility available. Whereas the normal battalions, there is no flexibility. they have a standard issue. So here they will pick and choose how they want to configure themselves. So there is a lot of flexibility in their mission orientation. The effect on ground is more important than how you're formed.
Just moving to defense modernization now, in terms of India's readiness. Atmanirbhar Bharat, in terms of one of the key elements of defense modernization is make in India, build in India, design in India, and therefore not be dependent on an outside country when in the eventuality of a war or in the eventuality of a need that arises. Uh, while it sounds very ambitious on paper, sir, and a lot of forward movements have been made in the direction, but on the ground there are growing delays, and I've been speaking to a lot of people in the services who talk about delays, capability gaps, import dependencies. What are the challenges that we face in the Make in India defense foray so far?
When you talk about Atmanirbharta or self-reliance, it means you will not import anything from outside and you will make everything at home. I think it is not possible for any country to achieve 100% self-reliance, because what is important for industry, or even when you look at the research and development, is when you invest in research and development, you cannot really put so much of resources into research and development of every small element that you want. Nor is your industry would make profit, because the scales are not of the kind which will make them profitable. So as a result, certain amount of scaling is extremely important when the defense industrial complex comes up, because after all, it is a defense business. Countries who have huge amount of export potential, that is where the defense industrial complex really comes in, because they can invest huge amount of money in research and development. They can have production facilities which are going to give them the scales of economy. Now imagine if somebody has to make a very specialized equipment, and at the end of it you say, I need 10 pieces. Nobody is going to spend huge amount of money for research and development and have that kind of a very high-tech artifact produced when it is only going to be more expensive to produce, extremely expensive to research, and very little return on investment. So I think scales are very important. But in India, since we have a huge army, we have also a huge requirement of our military.
So scale is a problem.
Scale is a problem, but not that kind of a problem. But at the moment, we have a supply chain problem that you cannot overnight start producing things in India. Say, for example, if you have to build your autonomous systems, huge amount of chips are required, semiconductors. So we don't have that kind of ability yet to produce. But I think slowly we are trying to produce semiconductors in India. That actually is the core for having. So there are three things: power, materials, and electronics, as I call it, PME. Whatever electronic gadgets you have, they need power. Batteries, storage. Imagine you having a mobile in your hand, and suppose I tell you that in 24 hours there will be no electricity in your house. You will never realize that you will be also out of communication. Though your phones are not directly running on electricity, which is coming to your house. But by the evening, you realize that you need electricity to charge your phone. So power becomes the central point for any of the artifacts that you use today, even in warfare. So the kind of power that is going to be used in a battlefield is humongous. Second is materials. To make anything, whether it is electronic or you want to have EVs, as you know, that you need materials to be able to produce those kind of things. And if you don't have materials, you got to import materials. So you might be able to have manufacturing, but you still might have to depend on materials from outside. And third thing is electronics. And electronics is all about research and development and miniaturization. So there will always be a challenge in the PME, the power, materials, and electronics. So therefore, China has invested correctly on materials because 50% of the rare earth is with China. And over a period of time, I think they strategize it well. Even if they don't have materials, they have processing plants. And if there is something which is available somewhere else, it can't be sold unless it is processed, and they have to send it for processing to China. So 90% of processing is happening in China. So I think they have been very smart that they have invested rightly so that whether they have the materials or not, because of the processing facility, they would have access to the materials.
Right. But there is also the over dependence on defense PSUs, on DRDO, etc. And that is that enabling self reliance or slowing it down? Because they've been around for years, but they've not been able to give us that edge so far.
I think some amount of steps have been taken, like corporatization of the Ordnance Factory Board. They have become a little better because earlier they were just about people on salary without any targets, without any achievement, without any incentives, and we could not move them around. Huge amount of uh, labor unions would make it impossible to move them around. But I think corporatization is half a step towards privatization. I think today we have huge number of startups which are coming up. They are quite well motivated. A lot of entrepreneurs who've actually trained abroad or worked abroad have also started coming to India to have some facility or the other where they can contribute to privatization. And once they are scaled up, I think they would contribute hugely. But I think there's a work in progress. We have to make sure that some of the PSUs allow the private entities to come up and give them hand holding rather than becoming a banyan tree and not allow the private players to come in. I think the government is taking some initiative to make sure that the private players are given due financial help.
Is it enough?
No, it is not enough. I think it is just a beginning, and
So you're
it,
really too late in life.
well, at least somewhere you have to start.
We start.
I mean, I'm just seeing, yes, they have started. But yes, they could have started some 30, 40 years back, but it hasn't happened. I think even priorities of the countries change over a period of time. If you have your adversaries giving you challenges, obviously you'll respond to challenges. If the countries don't, if your adversaries don't give you challenges, then obviously you will bask in your whatever.
What we want,
Yeah.
sir, so adversary has been giving us challenges, but we've decided not to, or perhaps our priorities were our poor and our food security rather than our national security at that point in time.
You look at the pie chart and you would know that out of a 100 rupees, kitty that you have, how much can you afford? Actually, technically, we've been talking about 3% of the GDP should be given to the defense. We hardly had 2% ever. Very rarely we had anything to do 2 plus. Though these are the yardsticks which are known globally, but well, we, as a percentage of GDP, we actually need not only defense budgets, but also attention to various sectors for investment in high technology, dual use, industries coming up to support the defense.
You were deputy chief, IDS, coordinating Army, Navy, and Air Force. On paper, jointedness sounds very great. But on ground, what are the biggest friction points that you see? Because we've been talking about theater commands for quite some time now. Still to see it coming into action formally. Some of it we saw in Operation Sindoor. What are the challenges do you see there?
You have to look at jointness, integration, and theaterization as a concept which is a moving concept. When you talk about jointness, it means the Army, Navy, Air Force and the cyber and the space should be able to come together jointly whenever required. So that is jointness. After Kargil war, of course, the headquarter ideas came up. They started doing a lot of things jointly. Slowly, we started integrating because the officers got cross-posted. A lot of technologies had platforms which were integrated across services. As far as theaterization is concerned, now that is from jointness to integration to theaterize would mean that all the elements put together would be given to one commander with full resources available at his disposal. He could be from the Army, Navy, or Air Force, depending on the specialization. So, as a result, when you are looking at the theaterization, we need to make sure that whatever is required in the theater should be able to make that theater self-sustaining in operations so that you don't have to get anything from outside. Say, if there is an adversary, this theater should be able to respond to all the calls and demands which will come out of fighting in a particular sector in a particular manner, because the doctrines got to be different, the equipment got to be different, the terrains are different. So as a result, I think it is more to do with a resource allocation, doctrinal ability to ensure that whatever organizational structure comes up should be able to work as a networked entity rather than entity which has been hurriedly put together.
So when you see these theater commands actually coming into force,
I can't say a lot of decisions are taken at the highest level, and the highest level understands that if the resource allocation and the organizational needs got to be looked at, then India being actively committed on the borders, it is not like United States of America that you can pick and choose when you want to fight a battle, and otherwise you are all sitting on the mainland away from, so you can reconfigure and you can keep doing whatever you want to reorganize your own way during peacetime and get out as an expeditionary force by configuring it in a certain way. We are actively committed on the border. So any transformation which happens while you're actively committed on the border, gives you more understanding of your requirements, but at the same time, it is very difficult to transform while you are at play.
we did see in Operation Sindoor some form of a theater command forming. Could you sort of take our viewers through that?
See, when you're talking about a theater command, it is then one commander with entire theater having resources put at the disposal of one theater command,
Which is Army, Navy, Air Force.
which is Army, Navy, Air Force. Now we know that in Siachen Glacier there's no role of Navy. So really, a lot of people don't understand that if you want to have operations conducted in high altitude or super high altitude, the Air Force would come in, but there will also be a lot of Army aviation which is required to give close air support, or some amount of support which is required from the drones, which can be Army drones, which can be Air Force drones. So whatever the resources are on ground, they have to suit the requirement of the terrain and the concept, which would make sure that the design of battle fits into how you configure your communication structure and the wherewithal. So I think even though you might have theaters at some point, but I think still flexibility is something which should never be forgotten. You cannot really have rigidity in theaters. Within the theaters, you have to have a lot of flexibility.
We've talked all this while on the premise that, India's lessons that we need to draw from the wars that are raging across the world. Just coming back, you commanded the 14th Corps, a very sensitive theater India has. How real is this two-front threat on our northern and western borders as on date?
I think two-front theater is not imaginary. It is for the real. The way Pakistan and China work together, from conceptual to technological integration, which we saw somewhere unfolding during Op Sindoor, I think we have to be very careful. If space and cyber are concerned, you can join them because none of them is visible to anyone. Pakistan can use all the space assets of China anytime. Baidu system is already available with Pakistan. Similarly, if you have to use autonomous systems, the missiles for deep strike can be controlled by the satellites from anywhere. Wherever it is being controlled from will never be known to anybody. Similarly, cyber. So cyber and space both are global commons. So therefore, there's no territory involved here. So there is no sovereignty involved here. More we move away from contact and kinetic to non-contact and non-kinetic, and then non-contact to kinetic, kinetic to kinetic, I think a lot of changes would happen, which is quite possible, like a switch of a button. Two adversaries can start coming together and you won't know.
Three big takeaways for India, lessons for India from the wars that are raging, according to you, in your priority. If you were to do 1, 2, 3, what would they be?
Read the narrative carefully, because most of the wars will start with a narrative with the aim to wrong-foot you, make you take a wrong decision. It means that there will be a kill chain designed for you. Recognize the kill chains. Second thing is understand where the surprises will come from. And you respond to a surprise in a predictable fashion. It means that surprise was designed as a kill chain. So therefore, the kill chains got to be studied. And when you configure your kill chain, make sure that you're not actually going into a predictive pattern where that you'd land up responding to a kill chain rather than configuring a kill chain. I think these are very important. And therefore, you must make sure that all your systems do not have supply chain infection. More you become autonomous, you have to make sure that the systems are owned by you. It should not happen that systems have been produced by you with supply chain infection coming in and go into the hands of somebody else to control it. More you go into bots, make sure that bots are working for you and not against you. So therefore, the autonomous warfare is extremely challenging as far as the ownership is concerned. That is where Atmanirbharta is central to owning the battlefield.
Right. And Mosaic warfare?
Mosaic warfare, in any case, is a concept. I think India needs one. And when you go autonomous, I think Mosaic is the only way that you should go autonomous, not the other way around.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to us, sir. And thank you for your time. We've come a long way. But thank you so much. I think I really enjoyed speaking with you and we were able to go into various aspects of India's defense preparedness. And I hope that we will, or we are already in the process of modernizing our defense preparedness and getting battle ready, so to speak. And because we live in very turbulent times and they're just not going away anytime soon.
And I think we should thank the challenger. Once we get challenged, we become better. So we should not be scared that we are being challenged and there are adversaries. It is good for us. It is good for India's future growth and strength.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.